I'm going to be honest with you guys. Typically, I would not make a video on this topic at all whatsoever. Typically, I would just let this pass and, we would talk about it on Twitter or something like that. But I'm sure the people that have been riding with my channel for a little bit understand how absolutely frustrated I get when a well-known analyst uses his power in order to make a player, one of the most respected players in the NBA, look really, really bad. And for those of you guys who don't know what I'm talking about, I am talking about Dan Orlovsky. Now, before I get to this story, guys, there's a good chance that I'm probably live streaming on Twitch right now, so make sure to come on by. My Twitch is twitch.tv/Theflightmike, and I live stream on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Pacific time. On top of that, I completely revamped my TikTok content to reflect the content that I make in my actual YouTube videos. So for those of you guys that didn't really like it before, I'm pretty sure you'd really enjoy the way it looks now. So make sure you guys check it out. Cue the music. What's going on, everybody? Your boy, Theflightmike, back with some NBA news, and this is the first bit of NBA news I've gotten to you guys in. It's been 4 days, so I want to start by saying I absolutely miss you guys, but I also know I have this reputation for sometimes dragging out intros, so I'm going to try to avoid that here and just jump into the meat of everything. So for those of you guys that don't know who Dan Orlovsky is, he is a former backup quarterback, and he wasn't really a very good one. But despite this, he is an analyst currently, and he spends his time commentating on weird matters such as this that don't really pertain to the NFL, which, with all due respect, I'd 100% respect Dan Orlovsky's opinion on all things football. When it comes to basketball related matters, that's when I start to be a little bit confused, because it's kind of like if you're watching Paul Pierce commentate on a tennis match or a football match or a baseball match. It just doesn't make much sense. Don't get me wrong, I've seen Kevin Harlan do a phenomenal job doing color commentary from anything from NFL games on CBS to NBA games and NBA video games. So some people could pull it off, but when it comes to jumping into the nitty-gritty about some stuff, it's best to know what your niche is and what you should talk about and what you shouldn't talk about, because Dan Orlovsky definitely went off the deep end here, and I feel like he really went too far. So for those of you guys that don't know what I'm discussing, there has been a myriad of different propositions as to how to bring the NBA back. By the way, I've stayed away from making content like this because it seems like every single day we are getting something else or a different piece of news, and honestly, I'd be titling the video the same exact thing every single time: the NBA's plan to come back. And it wouldn't actually be the plan to come back. So I'm waiting for the actual plan to come out before I actually deliver it to you guys. But if you want, I could also give you the speculation and where they are in terms of bringing the NBA back. Just let me know in the comment section down below. But one of the propositions that the NBA proposed to bring back the NBA was playing all of their games at Disney World. But there still wasn't really much of a concrete plan on how the rest of the season was going to look like if it was to resume safely. Now, general managers have been polled, and a lot of general managers, this just came in, 75% of them said that they would much rather have a play-in tournament to determine the final seeds than to just jump into the playoffs with the existing seeds. But you have to consider the fact that there hasn't been a decision yet. There's been a variety of various proposals as to how you could restart the NBA. There's even one suggestion of doing a World Cup-like format where you'd get teams into group stages and you'd play a couple of games to determine seeding. There was even a proposition of a 1 to 16 seeded NBA playoff. And then the more common ones is just starting the season as it's in the playoffs, or my personal favorite, having a play-in stage that would allow for teams to determine their seeding before they jump into the playoffs. And I feel like that's probably best because you get a chance to see teams warm up and gear up for the playoffs. But at the same time, if we jumped into the playoffs with a 1 to 16 seeded format, then we would have an opportunity to see the Brooklyn Nets potentially face off against the Los Angeles Lakers in the very first round. So could you imagine if Kevin Durant happens to come back for that very first round series? Like, it's not something you would typically see. It's not a scenario that any of us could have ever expected, because we all expected Kevin Durant to be out, but here we are with a possibility of KD being able to come back and play against the Los Angeles Lakers. That's just a little interesting little tidbit that I wanted to give you guys there. But the reason I'm telling you this is Damian Lillard had his own comments about the situation as well. And it has to do with if the NBA resumed and they just played a couple of games and they're going to add a few games to finish the regular season, and then the teams that are clearly out of the playoff picture aren't going to be in the playoff picture and aren't going to be in the playoffs. And Damian Lillard gave his opinion on that. While talking to Yahoo Sports' Chris Haynes, Lillard said that if we come back and they're just like, we're adding a few games to finish the regular season, and they're throwing us out there for meaningless games, and we don't have a true opportunity to get into the playoffs, I'm going to be with my team because I'm a part of my team. But I'm not going to be participating. I'm telling you that right now, and you can put that BS in there. Before we get to Dan Orlovsky's statement, I want you guys to let me know what you think about Lillard's statement. Do you agree with what he says? Do you see his side? I personally don't really see a problem with what he's saying, considering the fact that there's been multiple players that have been taking games off for load management even prior to the pandemic. Yeah, if the games are meaningless, I don't blame you for sitting out. Why should you risk injury if the game is already sealed and done? That's how we lost Derrick Rose, to a crucial career-ending injury. Well, not career-ending, but it sapped him of his athleticism. In the final moments of a game where he could have been sitting down because the Chicago Bulls clearly won, Tom Thibodeau left Derrick Rose in, and I know it's not necessarily his fault, but you have to take precautions if you are a NBA player. If there's nothing to play for, then yes, I understand that you would not want to play anymore. Bear in mind that the Portland Trailblazers are 3.5 games behind the Memphis Grizzlies for the 8th seed, and they're currently in the 9th seed in the Western Conference. Now pay attention to what Dan Orlovsky says, because the way he says it is probably the reason why he set Damian Lillard off. Orlovsky, who's a former NFL quarterback and an analyst on ESPN's Get Up. By the way, ESPN, if you're watching this, my lifelong dream is to totally be an analyst on ESPN one day and break news the way I do on my YouTube channel. So, yeah, if you are watching this, hit me up. My business email is in the description down below. You could also tweet at me or Instagram me. But Dan Orlovsky had this to say: if what we've experienced over the last 3 months has taught us anything, there is no such thing as meaningless anymore. We can't take things for granted anymore. And there's a difference between have to and get to. And Damian Lillard would have the opportunity to get to play basketball again. Because there's people out there who have to do things. Frontline workers and nurses and doctors. They have to go to work, and they have to work more hours and pay less because of what we're dealing with. Damian Lillard would have the opportunity to get to play basketball, and I would hope and challenge him in his mindset that the last few months has changed that, and that he'd take that opportunity to go and perform, to go and compete and get the opportunity to play basketball again. Some people don't have a choice anymore. They have to go do things. It is not an option. That's a great statement. That's a phenomenal statement. I actually like what Dan Orlovsky said. But I have some bad news for you guys. Dan Orlovsky didn't end it there. If he ended it there, then I would have said, well said, Dan. As a matter of fact, this is a remarkable take because he's right. There's some people that don't get to work right now. Like, I'm going to be 100% transparent with you guys. Clearly, my views are down because, NBA isn't as in demand. There's not really a lot of news to discuss. And on top of that, YouTuber CPM is down. Despite that, I am still pumping out content consistently on the NFL channel. I am still doing my best to produce TikTok content, and I'm still streaming on Twitch consistently. And that's because even though obviously we're not making as much money, we still have I'm so thankful that I have the opportunity to still produce content for you guys. And I'm very thankful that I have something to do with my time and I can invest myself into creating more content for you guys, no matter how much I'm getting paid for it. And I feel like Dan Orlovsky is trying to communicate that. Not everyone has that luxury, and you should be thankful that you have that luxury. But look at what Orlovsky says next. How can you sit there and go, nope, I'm not going to play, but understand that there's people out there that don't have that choice. They have to go to work. They have to go earn their money. I struggle with sitting here and going, you don't come off in some way a spoiled and entitled brat by saying I'm not going to play. And here's my issue with what Dan Orlovsky says, and I'm going to tell you that before we jump into what Lillard responds. Bro, Dan Orlovsky made a great comparison. You know, their doctors, nurses, and other healthcare workers are in a scenario where we absolutely need them during this pandemic. With all due respect to what Damian Lillard does, I absolutely love what he does, and I am a diehard basketball fan, but what he provides isn't necessarily essential, you know? So he's not going to sacrifice his body for a basketball game unless if there's something in it for him. And I respect that. And here's the weird thing about what Orlovsky says, and I really think this is the part that drives me nuts. The analogy in of itself is ridiculous because Damian Lillard doesn't necessarily have to play basketball. You know, like, unless if it makes sense, unless if he can win a championship, he's not going to play basketball. And if he doesn't play basketball, fine. You know, I'm sure fans are going to be okay with him not playing basketball if the Blazers have no chance of making it to the playoffs. And I'm sure we could all unanimously agree that if we were all in Damian Lillard's situation, we would probably do the same thing. But comparing Lillard to a doctor or an essential worker is absurd in and of itself. Although some of the things that Orlovsky says does make sense, the analogy is what just completely invalidates his statement. And what makes it even worse is how he ended his statement with complete and blatant disrespect to one of the best players in the NBA, who not only is respected for his talent on the court, but because of his upbringing. Damian Lillard had to scratch and claw his way to the position he's in today. Bear in mind, this isn't a player that went to the ACC in college and dominated in high school. This is a player that consistently worked on his grind, perfected his craft, went to some small college that you've never heard of another prospect going to in Weber State, and then getting drafted by the Portland Trail Blazers. This is a guy that hasn't left the Portland Trail Blazers when he clearly could have to chase rings, and decided to pledge his loyalty to that city. So calling him entitled and spoiled actually drives me a little nuts. Because look at what Damian Lillard says back. Entitled and spoiled? MF, watch your mouth. My background, family, and character couldn't be further from entitled and spoiled. I said what I said. And he continues with a nasty, absolutely knockout blow. Because Lillard would then tweet, "You sat out your entire career, basically." And dude, Dan Orlovsky was a absolutely horrific NFL quarterback. He's played in 27 games. He started in 12 games. His record in those starts are 2 wins and 10 losses. He's thrown 15 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. He's thrown for over 3,000 yards. And that's about it. Honestly, throughout, and bear in mind, he's been in the NFL for 10 years, so 3,000 yards in 10 years is absolutely abysmal. So I don't mean to be hard on Dan Orlovsky because I make mistakes as well in what I do. I've made a lot of mistakes as well in what I do, but I've learned from the mistake. So if I was to give any advice to Dan Orlovsky, just please put down your phone, apologize to one of the best players in the NBA and one of the most beloved players in the NBA, and let's all move on from this. Aside from that, I'm your boy, The Flight Mike, and I hope to catch you guys in tonight's stream or our next upload.